Greetings and God bless. I wanted to talk about if you're planning on moving, consider the weather. When I relocated to Rapid City, South Dakota, I had no idea that there would be 50-degree changes in a couple hours and that there'd be gale force winds regularly. Like I have only one time when I was an adult was I out when I was in Montana and it was so windy I couldn't. Well, it was windy and it was super rainy, so it was just incredibly crazy weather. And as a pedestrian, it was very difficult. And that was one time; it was a fluke. Um, but here in Rapid, it's all the time. I mean, I cannot even begin to count. I mean, it's not like 300 times, but it's probably been a dozen times or more where the wind has been so strong I can barely walk because it's buffeting me so heavily. And also the temperature changing so dramatically. So sometimes you're prepared for a warm day and it'll get to 40 degrees, or yeah, and or you're prepared for 40-degree weather and it's 70 for some weird reason. And as a pedestrian, I bring my coat with me, my hat, my scarves, and whatnot. And so it's just pretty unwieldy to, be prepared for, and the weather stations, like the weather, like, so when you're relocating to some place that has strange weather, unpredictable weather, and intense weather, kind of dangerous weather, because when the weather changes 50 degrees, either way, that's and you're a pedestrian. That's not very good. And the wind, like I don't understand how tourists who are coming here kind of naively, I don't know how they handle it because I mean I know people must be hiking and whatever, but maybe either it's covered up or they just handle it better than me. Uh, but so I just want to say if you're thinking of relocating, take a look at the weather and compare from previous years, and uh, and just know that sometimes weather reports are not going to be accurate in these locations with such bad weather. Because, like, I regard gale force winds regularly as bad weather. I regard 50-degree changes in temperature as bad weather for somebody who's a pedestrian. And something about when you're considering relocating to these places with bad weather, you're going to spend a lot of your time watching weather reports. That is something I never ever did until I moved to Rapid. And it is interesting because there's a mining and an engineer school that somebody told me, or I read online, that in the early 70s they did a weather modification thing, and that was what caused this major flood. I met somebody whose family was involved in that, and they said it wasn't involved in the flood, but we are. What are we seeing now? We're seeing a lot of floods. We know that weather modification is performed by governments because they claim that they're trying to prevent global warming, or they're trying to prevent climate change, and they keep blaming humans for existing and causing climate change when in fact a lot of what's going on is this weather modification, putting stuff in the atmosphere to reflect the sunlight. And who knows whether the weather modification, like HARP, which is this type of frequency um, device that moves the clouds. Like when you see the clouds doing that formation, it's called a macro sky. Uh, And when you see chemtrails, that's them. And the government admits that it does weather modification. So it admits that it sprays things in the air. And so that is what's causing all this climate change. It's not somebody who's breathing. It's not even you who's driving the car. I've never learned how to drive, so and most people are driving a car. So, anyways, if you're thinking of relocating, look into quirky things that you never would have considered, such as weather extremes. Compare how the weather extremes were for the past year. Also, look into air quality. One of the things when I moved here is when I did start looking up the weather, it would always say kind of bad air quality or fair air quality, and they would say there's dust particles. And I just found it kind of surprising because it's not a big city, and we're not near dunes or whatever. And I learned that we are near some cement plants and rock quarries. So I think it's either two cement plants or two rock quarries in one or the other. Pardon me. So apparently that is what's compromising the air quality. And I am wondering if if they're spraying pesticides or herbicides or something, because there's something in the environment here that really causes me great uh, fatigue. Uh, I don't know if it's mold. I don't know if it's mysterious toxin from previous sprayings or whatever. So, in my experience of living in major cities, when I've lived in New York, San Francisco, and Portland, Oregon, or other locations, there was good public transit and there was inclement weather. Um, but even when there was kind of intense weather, there was always like a library or a cafe or a bus shelter that you could kind of handle things, but as a pedestrian. And when you go into the interior or the inland northwest, such as Montana, and I'm speaking from South Dakota, there is no thought put into pedestrians. Pedestrians, if you're a pedestrian, you must be a subhuman garbage, and they're not going to create bus shelters unless it's at a fancy hotel or a mall or something like that, maybe. But even here at the malls, there's not even a sign telling you where the bus is here in Rapid City. Yeah. And so the bus drivers don't always know where to drop you off or where to pick you up. It's October 2021. It's a nightmare if you're a pedestrian. And yet the very people who are pushing uh the you know like the very people who don't care about pedestrians, the drivers that bully you when you're trying to cross the street, uh, they are the first person to talk about global warming. That is what I notice, is like everybody's virtue signaling by talking about global warming, but they do nothing to make it easier for people to ride a bike or walk to the mall or whatever. It's like somehow people are supposed to teleport themselves hither and yon, and while they get to while the people virtue signaling about global warming still get to drive all all as much as they want and have all their kids have cars, and you know it's just it's hypocrisy, and this is predicted in the Bible. But anyways, I just wanted to say, if you are thinking about relocating, and I know a lot of people who are considering doing that, make sure to look into the weather of the location, and look into the previous year past, and look into the historical, what are the highest and lows of the weather features of wherever you're planning to go. And especially if you're a pedestrian, if you're driving a car, you're somewhat insulated. So I guess this is a message more for pedestrians and what to look for. And I would say the wind was the biggest nightmare for me here in terms of weather. Um, Another thing that I really didn't expect is this reverse discrimination, where the First Nations people who are homeless and they're in groups, gangs. It feels like they park themselves at crosswalks. So when you're a pedestrian trying to cross the street, they'll gang up on you and require you to pay them a toll, pay them the reparations. Uh, and and I've encountered this, when I was naive and thought I could safely walk on the sidewalk here in Rapid, and there's no police around. There's nobody that has your back. There's no other people walking around. The First Nations people who are expecting you to pay them reparations. So that was another horrible um, experience of my relocation. And I discussed this, I mentioned this to other people who are from here who have, they always have had a car, and they're not working downtown, so don't have any contact. And they think I'm exaggerating. But when you are alone, uh, nobody else is around, and a group of people are cornering you when you're trying to cross the street and asking for money, and there's speeding cars going by and you're trapped, and it happens a lot. uh, it's very uncomfortable. So if you're planning on looking around, look into things like that. And from now on, I would never move to where there's a reservation nearby and where there's a tourist attraction such as Rapid City, because from what I understand is people get a ride from the reservation, they go to Rapid to shake down the tourists. And the tourists are, you know, probably nice people, probably don't have good boundaries, and so they fuel this terrible dynamic. And the police don't do anything. There's nobody walking on the sidewalk to kind of just back up any solitary person, white person that dares to walk on the sidewalk in Rapid. So you're on your own. And so if you're planning on relocating those things, and I think I'm the only one who's kind of have met some locals and who will talk about it, but because of the current climate, it's considered to be inappropriate to express this experience. Everybody's trying to be politically, but anyways, also the weather. Everybody kind of jokes where we are moving about weather being difficult, and that you're a wimp if you can't handle the weather or something. But weather considerations, in these kind of nuanced weather considerations, because we're aware, icy, living where it's icy. That's definitely a serious, obvious thing. But gale force winds inland is not obvious. You really don't expect gale force winds inland. I can imagine it on the coast, but not in the interior. And also just super aggressive, like I would say politically manipulated homeless people. That is very uncomfortable. And the fact that there's no police. Nobody's kind of got your back. There's nobody walking around making sure you're safe. And maybe the reason why is because they just expect that South Dakotans have guns and stuff like that. Maybe that's it. But yeah, so I just wanted to put that out there. And if you're in some location that has quirky weather, or some really a significant challenge as a pedestrian or as a driver, just something that's unexpected, please do a video about it. Like we kind of, I just think it's a kind of a considerate thing to do, to give people a heads up. So if you're prepared for gale force winds, because I met a lady who was complaining about her husband, who mentioned how bad the winds are. And I'm like, it's weird. I keep on meeting wives of husbands, wives who are so unsympathetic, wives who are kind of heartless. And I mean, I'm used to kind of a husband being heartless, but it's sad when, I mean, it's sad either way, but the wind here in Rapid is really bad. It's like dangerous. So it's just weird when people refuse to acknowledge the difficulty of a reality, and when people are kind of self-absorbed, or yeah, oblivious in that way. So I guess that's it. Thank you so much for listening. God bless.